You've given chances. Not one, not two, countless. You've explained, you've understood, you've forgiven, and every time you told yourself, maybe this time will be different. But let me ask you something, at what point does hope become self-betrayal? Because there's a quiet line that exists in every heart, a line between loving someone and losing yourself trying to keep them. And today is the day you stop crossing that line. You see, being an empath is a beautiful thing. It means you feel deeply, you care intensely, you don't give up easily. But somewhere along the way, you were taught that your strength lies in how much you can endure. It doesn't. Your strength lies in what you are no longer willing to tolerate. There is a difference between patience and permission. And every time you accept inconsistency, every time you excuse emotional absence, every time you say, it's okay, when it isn't, you are giving permission for the cycle to continue. Not because they are evil, not because they don't care at all, but because they don't care at all, but because they have learned that they don't have to rise to meet you when you keep lowering the bar to meet them. And that's the truth most people avoid. You cannot inspire someone to show up by accepting their absence. You cannot create security with someone who thrives on distance. And you cannot build a future with someone who only visits you in moments of convenience. Love is not meant to feel like waiting. It's not meant to feel like guessing. It's not meant to feel like constantly proving your worth to someone who should already see it. And here's where your power comes in. Not in convincing them, not in fixing them, not in loving harder, but in deciding, this is where it ends. Not from anger, not from bitterness, but from clarity. Clarity that says, I deserve consistency. I deserve presence. I deserve someone who doesn't make me question where I stand. Because the moment you truly understand your value, you stop negotiating with behavior that contradicts it. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. Walking away always is. Because part of you will remember the good moments, the potential, the version of them you hoped they'd become. But you are not here to love someone's potential. You are here to experience someone's reality. And if their reality cannot meet your needs, then your responsibility is not to shrink your needs. It's to honor them. This is your final stand, not a dramatic exit, not a loud declaration, but a quiet, unshakable decision within yourself that says, I will no longer abandon myself to keep someone else. And here's the beautiful part. The moment you stop chasing what isn't choosing you, you create space for something that will. But more importantly, you come back to yourself. And that is the greatest love story you will ever live. You've told yourself a story, one built on possibility, on glimpses of who they could be, on moments that felt just real enough to keep you holding on. And that's where it begins to unravel. Because hope, when it's grounded in reality, is powerful. But when it's built on inconsistency, it becomes a trap. There's a subtle but dangerous habit of looking at someone not for who they consistently show themselves to be, but for who they occasionally hint they might become. A good day here, a vulnerable moment there, a promise whispered at the right time, and suddenly all the confusion, the distance, the emotional unavailability gets softened in your mind. You start to piece together a version of them that feels safe to love. But clarity asks something different of you. It asks you to zoom out, not to focus on the highlight reel, but on the pattern. Because patterns don't lie. Patterns reveal what someone is truly available for, not just what they say they want. And when you really look, without filtering, without justifying, without filling in the gaps, you begin to see the truth that's been quietly sitting in front of you all along. Clarity means recognizing that inconsistencies is a message. Silence is a message. Silence is a response. Mixed signals are not complexity, they are confusion. And confusion is never a foundation for something stable, something lasting, something safe. The hardest part is that clarity often feels like loss at first, because when you stop holding on to potential, you also let go of the version of the future you had imagined. You release the idea that if they just change, everything will fall into place. You confront the uncomfortable reality that what you're experiencing right now might actually be all they have to give. And that realization can sting. Not because you're weak, but because you care. Because you invested. Because you saw something meaningful and wanted it to grow. But clarity isn't here to punish you. It's here to protect you. It's here to remind you that your time, your energy, your emotional capacity, these are not things to be spent hoping someone becomes ready. They are meant to be shared with someone who already is. When you choose clarity over hope, you're not becoming cynical. You're becoming honest. Honest about what you need. Honest about what you're receiving. Honest about what you're receiving. Honest about the gap between the two. And in that honesty, something powerful happens. You stop negotiating with reality. You no longer twist yourself into patience when what you're actually feeling is neglect. You no longer label inconsistency as just how they are. You stop calling emotional distance bad timing or fear of commitment as a way to make it easier to stay. Instead, you allow yourself to see things as they are, not as you wish they could be. And that shift changes everything, because the moment you stop clinging to potential, you reclaim your ability to choose based on truth. You step out of waiting, out of guessing, out of hoping for evidence, and you start responding to what's actually being shown to you. Clarity doesn't always feel comforting in the beginning. It strips away illusions, and illusions can feel safe. But what it gives you in return is far more valuable. Self-respect, direction, and the freedom to invest your heart where it won't have to fight just to be acknowledged. And once you experience that level of clarity, it becomes very difficult to go back to convincing yourself that breadcrumbs are enough. There comes a moment when you have to ask yourself a difficult question. Where do I end and where does everyone else begin? Because if you can't answer that clearly, you'll keep giving pieces of yourself away in the name of love until there's very little of you left. Boundaries are often misunderstood. People think they're about pushing others away, creating distance, or being difficult. But in truth, boundaries are the clearest expression of self-respect. They are the invisible lines that say, this is what I value. This is what I will protect. This is how I expect to be treated. And without them, love doesn't become deeper. It becomes distorted. Because when you don't have boundaries, you start tolerating things that don't align with your worth. You say yes when you mean no. You stay silent when something hurts. You accept less, hoping that your understanding, your patience, your empathy will somehow inspire the other person to meet you at your level. But here's the reality. People don't learn your value from what you say. They learn it from what you allow. Every time you ignore your own discomfort to keep the peace, every time you brush off behavior that doesn't sit right with you, every time you prioritize their feelings at the expense of your own, you are quietly teaching them that your needs are flexible, optional, even disposable. And that's not love. That's self-abandonment. You weren't meant to disappear inside someone else's emotional world. You weren't meant to carry the weight of understanding them while neglecting yourself. Real love doesn't require you to shrink, to bend endlessly, to make excuses for behavior that consistently hurts you. Boundaries don't destroy connection. They define it. They create a space where respect can actually exist. Because without limits, there's no clarity. Without clarity, there's no accountability. And without accountability, there's no real growth in a relationship. It's important to understand that setting boundaries doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring about yourself as well. It's the shift from I'll do anything to keep this to I will not lose myself to maintain this. And yes, that shift can feel uncomfortable, especially if you're used to being the one who understands, who forgives, who gives more chances. You might worry that speaking up will push them away, that holding your ground will create conflict, that choosing yourself will somehow make you selfish. But the truth is, the right kind of connection doesn't get threatened by your boundaries. It gets strengthened by them. Because the people who are truly aligned with you will respect the lines you draw. They won't see your standards as obstacles. They'll see them as a guide to how to love you better. And those who resist your boundaries, those who make you feel guilty for having them, who try to push past them, who only show up when it's convenient for them, they reveal something important. Not about your worth, but about their capacity. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They're about deciding what you will and will not accept in your space. They are your responsibility, not theirs. And when you honor them, you send a powerful message. Not just to others, but to yourself, that your feelings matter, your needs matter, your well-being matters. This is where self-respect is built. Not in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments where you choose not to tolerate what diminishes you, where you choose honesty over harmony, where you choose your own emotional safety over the temporary comfort of avoiding conflict, because the cost of having no boundaries is far greater than the discomfort of creating them. It's the slow erosion of your confidence. It's the resentment that builds when you give more than you receive. It's the exhaustion of constantly trying to earn a place in someone's life that should have been secure from the start. And the moment you truly understand that, something shifts. You stop seeing boundaries as something harsh or unnecessary. You start seeing them as essential. as the very thing that protects your peace, your dignity, your ability to love without losing yourself in the process. There's something incredibly seductive about words. The right sentence, spoken at the right moment, can feel like certainty. It can calm your doubts, soften your instincts, and make you believe that everything is finally aligning. But if you've ever found yourself holding on to what someone said while quietly struggling with what they actually do, then you already know the gap that exists between intention and reality. Consistency is what closes that gap. It's easy for someone to tell you they care. It's easy to promise change, to speak about effort, to paint a picture of what they want to be for you. Words cost very little in the sum moment. They don't require discipline. They don't demand follow-through, and they certainly don't test someone's character over time. But consistency does. Consistency is not built in a single conversation. It's revealed in patterns, in the way someone shows up not just when it's convenient, but when it requires effort, in how they respond not just when things are easy, but when life becomes complicated. It's the accumulation of small, repeated actions that align with what they claim to feel. And here's where so many people get caught. You start measuring someone's potential based on their best moments instead of their usual behavior. You remember the times they were present, attentive, open. You replay the conversations where they seemed clear, committed, invested. And without realizing it, you begin to give those moments more weight than the long stretches of inconsistency, distance, or confusion that surround them. But consistency isn't about who someone is on their best day. It's about who they are most of the time. Because anyone can rise to the occasion briefly. Anyone can say the right thing when they feel like they're about to lose you. Anyone can create a moment that feels meaningful. But a real connection isn't sustained by moments. It's sustained by reliability. Reliability means you don't have to guess. It means you're not left questioning where you stand from one day to the next. It means their presence in your life doesn't feel like something you have to earn or chase or decode. When someone is consistent, you feel it. There's a steadiness to them, a sense that their words and actions are not in conflict. You're not constantly adjusting your expectations to match their unpredictability. You're not lowering your standards just to maintain some form of connection. And that's the standard, not perfection, but alignment. Alignment between what they say and what they do. Because when those two things don't match, confusion takes over. And confusion is exhausting. It pulls you into overthinking, into analyzing every message, every delay, every shift in tone. It makes you question yourself instead of questioning the situation. But the truth is simple, even if it's uncomfortable, when someone's actions are inconsistent. Their commitment is inconsistent. And no amount of understanding on your part can compensate for that. You cannot build something stable with someone who only shows up intermittently. You cannot create security from unpredictability. And you cannot feel valued in a space where effort is occasional instead of consistent. Raising your standard to consistency doesn't mean you expect perfection. It means you expect effort that lasts. It means you recognize that real interest, real care, real intention, it shows up repeatedly, not just when it's at risk of disappearing. And the moment you start prioritizing consistency over words, something shifts within you. You stop being swayed by promises alone. You stop getting pulled back in by temporary improvements that don't sustain. You begin to observe instead of assume, to respond instead of hope, because consistency gives you something words alone never can: evidence. Evidence of who someone is, how they feel, and what they're truly willing to invest. And once you start making decisions based on that evidence, rather than the comfort of what's been said, you step into a different level of clarity, one where you're no longer chasing reassurance. You're simply recognizing truth. There's a quiet belief that lives in the background of many empathetic hearts. The idea that if you just love someone well enough, deeply enough, patiently enough, they will eventually rise to meet that love. That you're emotionally delayed, that your understanding will soften their fears, your consistency will. It'll stabilize their chaos, and your presence will inspire them to become ready. It's a beautiful belief, but it's also a dangerous one, because it places your power in the wrong place. You start to measure your success in a relationship not by how you're being treated, but by how much progress they are making. You become invested in their potential growth, their healing, their journey, almost as if it's something you can influence through your effort alone. And without realizing it, you take on a role that was never yours to carry. You become the encourager, the healer, the one who understands their past, who makes space for their fears, who stays even when things are unclear. You tell yourself, they just need time, or they've been hurt before, or if I show them what real love looks like, they'll get there. Times the truth that changes everything. You cannot love someone into readiness. Readiness is an internal decision. It comes from their willingness to grow, to confront their patterns, to take responsibility for how they show up. It's not something that can be transferred from you to them, no matter how much you care, because growth requires ownership. And ownership cannot be outsourced. No matter how patient you are, no matter how supportive you become, you cannot do the work for someone. You cannot process their fears on their behalf. You cannot make them choose consistency, openness, or commitment if they are not actively choosing that for themselves. What often happens instead is that your effort creates comfort for them. Not transformation. Comfort. They feel understood, accepted, even admired in moments. But that doesn't necessarily push them to change. In fact, it can sometimes allow them to stay exactly where they are, because the relationship continues without them having to truly evolve. And this is where it becomes painful for you. Because while you're investing more, hoping for growth, they remain the same. And you start to feel the imbalance. The emotional weight you're carrying begins to exhaust you. You give more, explain more, wait more, and yet the dynamic doesn't fundamentally shift. At some point, you have to ask yourself, am I loving them or am I trying to build them? Because those are two very different things. Love is shared between two people who are both willing to show up. It's mutual, it's responsive, it evolves together. But trying to build someone, trying to guide them into becoming who you need them to be, that's a one-sided effort. And no matter how much heart you pour into it, it cannot create a balanced relationship. This doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean they're incapable of growth. It simply means they are not ready times right now in the way that you need. And your responsibility is not to wait until they are. Your responsibility is to honor where they are and decide if that aligns with what you want for your life. Because staying in the hope that someone will become ready keeps you anchored to a future that hasn't arrived. It pulls you away from the present reality where your needs may not be fully met, where your emotional experience feels uncertain, where you're constantly adjusting to their pace instead of living at your own. There is strength in recognizing that someone's journey is their own, that their healing is their responsibility, and that your role is not to sacrifice your well-being in the process of waiting for them to catch up. When you release the idea that your love can change someone, you don't become less compassionate, you become more grounded. You start to see people for where they are, not where you hope they'll be. You stop overextending yourself in situations that require mutual effort but only receive one-sided investment. And in that shift, you reclaim something incredibly important: your energy, your time, and your emotional freedom. Because love was never meant to be a project. It was meant to be a partnership. There is a difference between someone being present in your life and someone being emotionally available within it. And that difference is everything, because a person can text you every day, spend time with you, even share moments that feel intimate, and still remain emotionally distant, still keep parts of themselves guarded, still avoid the depth that true connection requires. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake proximity for intimacy. Emotional availability is not about how often someone is around. It's about how open they are when they are. It's about their willingness to be seen, to communicate honestly, engage with the reality of a relationship instead of skimming along the surface of it. It means they don't just show up when it feels easy or convenient. They show up when conversations get uncomfortable, when clarity is needed, when vulnerability is required. Because real connection doesn't exist in avoidance. It exists in presence. And presence is more than physical. It's emotional, it's mental, it's intentional. It's someone being there with you, not just near you. When someone is emotionally unavailable, there's often a pattern you can feel but struggle to explain. Conversations stay light when they need to go deeper. Important topics get deflected, delayed, or minimized. You might express a need, and instead of being met with understanding, you're met with distance, silence, or vague reassurance that never quite leads to change. It leaves you feeling like you're reaching for something that keeps pulling just out of your grasp. And so you try to bridge the gap, you open up more, hoping they'll follow. You explain your feelings more clearly, hoping they'll understand. You become more patient, more accommodating, thinking that if you just create enough safety, enough space, enough love, they'll finally let their walls down. But emotionally delayed isn't something you can unlock from the outside. It's a choice someone makes within themselves. It requires self-awareness. It requires courage. It requires a willingness to confront fears of vulnerability, rejection, or commitment. And if someone is not ready to face those things, no amount of your effort can substitute for their decision to do so. This is why emotional availability has to be non-negotiable. Not because you're demanding perfection, but because you're honoring the kind of connection you truly want. A connection where you don't have to second guess how someone feels, where communication is not avoided but embraced, where your emotions are not seen as too much, but as something to understand and engage with. Without emotional availability, you're left trying to build something meaningful with someone who is only partially present. And that creates a constant imbalance. You feel more invested, more exposed, more affected. Because you're bringing your full self into a space where the other person is holding parts of themselves back. And over time, that dynamic begins to wear on you. It creates uncertainty. It creates emotional fatigue. It makes you question whether your needs are reasonable, whether your expectations are too high. But they're not. Wanting someone who can meet you emotionally is not asking for too much. It's asking for the foundation of a real relationship. And here's the important part. Recognizing emotional unavailability is not about labeling or judging the other person. It's about observing how they show up and being honest about whether that aligns with what you need. Because when you ignore emotional unavailability, you end up compensating for it. You become the one who initiates the deeper conversations, the one who tries to create closeness, the one who carries the emotional weight of the connection. And while that might keep things going for a while, it doesn't create balance. It creates burnout. At some point, you have to stop asking, why are they like this? And start asking, is this enough for me? Because emotional availability is not something you should have to earn. It's something that should be given freely by someone who is ready to connect. And the moment you decide that this level of openness, this level of presence, this level of emotional honesty is a standard, not a request, you shift the entire dynamic of your relationships. You stop settling for partial connection. You start expecting some, even real. There's a narrative that keeps far too many people stuck. The idea that walking away means you've failed. That if you just held on a little longer, tried a little harder, understood a little deeper, something would have finally clicked into place. So when you reach the point of leaving, it doesn't immediately feel like strength. It feels like loss. It feels like giving up on something you invested your time, your energy, your heart into. It feels like closing the door on what could have been. And because of that, there's a part of you that hesitates, that wonders if you're making a mistake. But here's what needs to shift. Walking away is not a failure of love. It's a recognition of reality. It's the moment you stop measuring your worth by how long you can endure something that isn't right for you. Because staying in the situation that consistently leaves you confused, undervalued, or emotionally drained is not loyalty. It's self-neglect. It's choosing familiarity over fulfillment. It's holding on to the known even when the known is hurting you. And it's understandable why that happens. You build emotional attachment not just to the person, but to the routine, the conversations, the small moments that made everything feel meaningful. You become accustomed to their presence, even if that presence is inconsistent. So the idea of leaving doesn't just mean losing them. It means stepping into the unknown. And the unknown can feel intimidating. But what's often overlooked is the situation you're in is already costing you something. It's costing you peace of mind. It's costing you emotional stability. It's costing you the ability to feel secure, valued, and at ease within the connection. And when you stay, you continue to pay that price every single day. Walking away is the moment you decide that cost is too high. It's not about punishing the other person. It's not about proving a point. It's about reclaiming yourself. Because every time you choose to remain in something that doesn't meet your needs, you send a message inward. This is what I'm willing to accept. And over time, that message shapes your sense of worth. But the moment you walk away, a different message is sent. One that says, I matter enough to leave what hurts me. That is not weakness. That is not weakness. That is power. Power isn't always loud. It doesn't always look like confrontation or dramatic endings. Sometimes power is quiet. It's the decision you make within yourself, the one no one else can see, where you finally say, I'm done abandoning myself for this. And yes, there will be discomfort. You might miss them. You might question your decision in moments of loneliness. You might even be tempted to go back, especially when they resurface with just enough attention to reopen the door. But this is where your strength is tested, not in leaving once, but in continuing to choose yourself even when it feels hard. Because walking away is not a single action. It's a commitment. A commitment to no longer settling for incommitment, to no longer chasing for incommitment, to no longer chasing clarity. A commitment to no longer shrinking your needs to fit someone else's limitations. And the more you honor that commitment, the more something begins to rebuild within you. Your confidence returns. Your sense of self stabilizes. The emotional weight you were carrying starts to lift. You begin to experience what it feels like to not be in a constant state of uncertainty. And that clarity creates space. Space for something healthier, something more aligned, something that doesn't require you to question your worth or your place in someone's life. But even beyond that, it creates space for you to reconnect with yourself. Because in the process of trying to make something work, it's easy to lose sight of your own needs, your own voice, your own sense of direction. Walking away brings you back to that. It reminds you that you are not defined by who stays or who leaves. You are defined by what you choose to accept. And when you choose to walk away from what diminishes you, you are not losing. You are finally standing in your own value. There is something you carry that is more valuable than you often realize. It's not just your time, not just your attention. It's your energy. The way you show up, the way you care, the way you listen, support and invest emotionally. That energy is not endless, even if you've learned to give as though it is. And the moment you start treating it like something unlimited, people will too. Your energy shapes your experiences. It determines what you tolerate, what you pursue, and what you hold on to. It influences the dynamics you stay in and the ones you walk away from. And when it's constantly being poured into situations where it's not valued, not reciprocated, not protected, it begins to drain you in ways that aren't always immediately visible. You might still function, you might still show up, but internally, something feels off. Heavier, more tired, less certain. That's what happens when your energy is being misused. Because not every connection deserves access to you at the same level. Not everyone is capable of handling the depth you bring. And if you don't become intentional about where your energy goes, it will naturally flow toward familiarity, even if that familiarity is unfulfilling. This is why recognizing the value of your energy is so important. It shifts you from a place of giving automatically to giving consciously. Instead of asking, how can I make this work? You begin to ask, is this worth my energy? Instead of trying to prove your value through how much you give, you begin to observe, how your energy is received. Because the right connection doesn't just take from you, it meets you, it respects your time, it values your presence. It responds to your effort with effort of its own. There's a mutual exchange that feels natural, not forced. You're not constantly pouring from a full cup into an empty one. You're sharing between two people who are both contributing. But when that balance doesn't exist, your energy starts compensating. You become the one who initiates more, the one who tries harder, the one who keeps the connection alive even when the other person is inconsistent or distant. And while that might sustain something temporarily, it creates a long-term imbalance that leaves you feeling depleted. At some point, you have to recognize that your energy is not meant to fix imbalances. It's meant to flow where it's honored. And honoring your energy means being willing to pull it back when it's not. It means not overextending yourself just to maintain a connection. It means not giving access to your time, your emotions, your attention at the same level when it's not being respected or returned. This doesn't mean you become closed off or guarded in a negative way. It means you become selective, intentional, aware of the fact that what you offer is meaningful and therefore should not be given carelessly. Because when you give your energy to someone who doesn't value it, you slowly start to feel undervalued yourself. Not because you are, but because of where you're placing your investment. And this is where your power lies, in your ability to redirect that energy, to step back from what drains you, to stop investing in what consistently leaves you feeling uncertain or unappreciated, to choose spaces, people, and connections that recognize and respect what you bring. When you do that, something shifts internally. You feel lighter, more grounded, more in control of your emotional world. You're no longer chasing validation or trying to create balance where there is none. You're simply responding to what is being matched. And over time, this changes the quality of your relationships. Because you're no longer available for dynamics that require you to overgive. You're available for something healthier, something reciprocal, something steady, something that doesn't take more from you than it gives back. Your energy is not something to be proven. It's something to be protected. And the moment you truly understand that, you stop treating it as something to spend freely in the hope of being valued. You start treating it as something sacred, only given where it's genuinely seen, respected, and returned. Thank you for your time and trust. Wishing you clarity, strength, and peace on your journey ahead. Goodbye, and may every step you take honor your heart and your worth.